Hi, folks. Donnie Mono here, also known as Frequency. I was actually just watching Anthony, also known as Sketches, DDR videos, specifically the last one he just made. She called me out on it, talking a little bit about some of the things that I did in the DDR community, which is great, and I appreciate that. Funny enough, I completely forgot that I used to stealth spin a disc with him. uh, just mostly because that song hasn't been around since Seventh Mix, which has been a long time ago. Um, so I kind of wanted to fill in some of Long Island DDR as I remember it, just to kind of echo some of the stuff that Anthony's been doing over there. And to do that, I kind of have to start with how I started in DDR, which was with a friend of mine named Jen. So folks in the DDR community from back then will probably remember Jen. I think her screen name was Tomo, Tomoe. And we used to be in the same friend group together in high school. A whole bunch of nerds doing nerdy things. Um, and we were hanging out together. We went to Jillian's in Long Island in Farmingdale, right? Farmingdale. And they had a DDR one there, and they actually always had one there. It was like for as long as DDR mixes were being upgraded, they always still just had the version one there. It was crazy. Um, but anyway, we went there. She went to play on it, and I'm looking. Um, I was actually watching prior to that people actually playing really well. We're talking like Paranoia on that machine. I was like, wow, that looks really complicated. I don't think I'm about to figure out how to play that, especially in front of all these people and stuff like that. I look really embarrassed. Um, but then uh, she was like, yeah, I have this. We could just play at home to get like used to it, whatever. And that's kind of what we did. We played on like the pad in my friend, I think it was my friend Mike's house, which was usually like the headquarters for this group. We used to all go to Mike's house, um, and we used to play at on the on the home pads there, and we used to like practice and stuff. And I remember learning ecstasy. I think it was on basic or something like that, or light, change names. And remembering that there was like this way that you could like spin around to do it, and I thought that was really fun to like spin around and stuff. Um, so getting better, and as you get better, you want to actually play on a machine that has like more songs, and admittedly is a better quality play because the home pads would slide around and it's not as ergonomic as being on a actual DDR arcade stage. Um, so I was actually, I think at this time I was also working at Fun Zone. Yeah, I think that's right. So Fun Zone was an arcade in Farmingdale, and at the time I started playing, I don't think they had DDR, but I got really excited when they did. So when they actually did get DDR, which I think they originally got a fifth mix first, which would tell you about the time where this kind of all started. Um, I was, starting to play on that. Well, actually, I'm trying to remember if FYE was first, because FYE, you can't speak about Long Island DDR without thinking about or talking about FYE. Um, I'm having some, fog about what happened first. I'm thinking FYE was probably first in terms of getting the machine, and then eventually Fun Zone afterwards, because FYE was usually in the forefront of whatever you know um, machine was coming out. So I'll talk about FYE first because that was most of the stuff that was going on there. I'll mention a little bit about Fun Zone because it wasn't really all that of a hub until maybe a little later on. But at FYE, you had, I think it was two DDR machines at all times. I don't think there was ever a time there was just only one. It was two DDR machines, and then they also had a couple other music games. I remember the Para specifically, and I think actually that's really where I got my start going to the arcades. Was actually going and playing Para, which is a rhythm game. There you basically like you have like five arrows basically, and you instead of hitting any buttons, you are like putting your limbs into this light beam that's basically hitting a sensor. And it was like a freestyle kind of thing because I was dancing at the time and I was like, okay, this is fun to dance to. But eventually, it's kind of like this gateway drug of you're eventually going to be playing DDR. It's just going to happen because it's around you. So there were people that were playing at FYE, and there was actually a group at FYE that were all very good, and they called themselves DBDRZ. And I know there's a lot of people that just got triggered by me saying those initials that are probably watching this video because that group was like in a odd rivalry with New York City eventually. There were people that were, and especially on the forums, DDR Freak, there was a whole bunch of back and forth that was going on, lots of drama and stuff like that. But most of the members were basically named after Dragon Ball Z characters. So the main person was named Goku, and he was the best out of that group. But we also had people like, I think there was a Gohan, there was a Trunks, and a couple other folks. I think maybe 5 or 6 people, I think, in total, in varying degrees of um, I guess interest. Um, so there was a lot of that was going on, and you couldn't not watch them play because they were also like kind of freestyling and doing perfect attack at the same kind of time. So they were doing that kind of stuff. They were having fun with it. But for whatever reason, there was beef between them and most of the folks in New York City, and there was just online, how the internet usually just does that. Um, so I remember that, and then I also will also remember Airwalker. So Airwalker was his own person that was commonly coming to FYE and also playing, and he was also very, very good. One of the things that was super standout about him was later on when we first got Six Mix. The first Six Mix machine, as far as we know in New York, was ended up in FYE. And I actually remember going into FYE one particular weekend, and we walked in, and Ted, who you also cannot talk about, Long Island DDR without talking about Ted. Um, Ted, who was the manager at FYE, was like, "Hey, we have a little surprise for you in the back." And me and my friends at the time, I think it was with Jen and I don't know who else I was with, but we'll go to the back, and there it is, Six Mix lit up, baby blue, I think it was, or whatever the hell that color was. It was like, oh my god, what the hell's going on over here? This is crazy. So we played it, and I remember seeing freeze arrows for the first time and go like, oh my god, I don't know how to do a freeze arrow. That's crazy. But I bring that up because that's what I remember Airwalker very much specifically rising up a little bit, because what he was doing was he was trying to get to max 300 to play it all the time, and he would just um, double A stuff really easily all the time. He was doing freckles. That was the number one thing to double A to get the max 300. Like, if you want to look at the popularity charts, it was always freckles first. Even when people weren't even playing it to get to max 300, you would have people who were just gunning on the machine, listening to it and going, oh, that's cute, let me play that. But eventually he was like double Aing Cowgirl, which wasn't a common thing to double A because of the gallops, but he was just like, I could double A this too. So instead of just listening to freckles every single time to get the max 300 and get a little farther, he would do Cowgirl and maybe a couple other things. But he was very, very good. And arguably probably better than Goku eventually. Or I shouldn't say eventually, he was probably always a little bit better than Goku. So I remember much of that. And then I want to mention Ted again because he was instrumental in really bringing the community together, not just in Long Island, but also New York City. Like, you just can't speak too highly about Ted because he really, and I don't really understand why, but I guess you don't need to, that Ted was the manager of FYE. He was the person who was like looking into the next big game or whatever. So clearly that's why Six Mix was there. That's why things like Guitar Freak and Drum Mania and stuff like that were there. There was a Dance Maniacs machine, which both Ted and I loved. Dance Maniacs, similar to Para Para, a little bit more technical, but that was also a really great game. And one of the things that he organized on a fairly regular basis, which was no small task, was something called the lock-in. So FYE was actually in the Bayshore Mall in in East Islip, Islip, whatever. I can't. It's too far out. Um, and am I still recording? Yeah. Um, and we would go to this the you know the FYE was like attached to the mall, but had its own entrance. So what that had the ability to do was to basically close down the mall, but still have FYE's arcade section open. So what he would do is he would coordinate with the arcade management and say, "Hey, I want to hold an event at the arcade after hours," and he would organize the event. Probably have a couple of people. I think I remember helping organize maybe one of them. Um, but anyway, people would come in after hours. He would come into the arcade. He would basically, I think it was like a prepaid kind of charge that he would have. You come in and pay. I think whatever it was, $5, $10, 15, whatever it was, and then I think he would put everything on free play, if I remember correctly. Um, and yeah, you just hang out all night. There would be food and some drinks and stuff like that because we were, incredibly respectful of like him doing that for us to like really get the community together. Because I mean, otherwise it's just people showing up to an arcade randomly, kind of similar to the way that Anthony was talking about how you would have these people that would be in specific arcades that you would see play. That didn't really happen as much in Long Island because we didn't have the amount of locations that New York City did. I think at its peak, Long Island had certainly FYE. There was a place that was out east and some sports complex that, of course, people out east would play, but we didn't really see them at all often. Fun Zone, of course, had one machine that was there, and then there was a couple of other ones that were spread across the island in very outskirts. Bayville, for example. There's a random machine in Bayville, Long Island, which was a fifth mix, which was great because if you really want to get away from people, you can go up there. And there was a couple machines. There was the one in um, basically Southwest Long Island, not Brooklyn, but like Long Island proper, socially speaking. There was one in Fun Station, I think you would say, which is in Valley Stream, and then somewhere around some other ones that were down there. So, but basically everyone ended up coming to FYE if we're going to meet anybody, but they were so spread out. So like you didn't really, like end up seeing people in the same way that in New York City where you would see people on the subway. It's very close, relatively speaking. Um, so that's much of what I remember. From there, this is the timeline isn't really directly. I'm not like definitely not doing it as a timeline necessarily. I'm just remembering pieces of what we did and of my experience of. And I remember DDR Freak. I don't remember who introduced me to DDR Freak. I would like to say maybe it was Jen, but maybe it wasn't. But eventually on DDR Freak, there I was in the New York forum, which is basically where everyone was, and someone posted that they were going to visit from the city. They were going to visit Fun Zone. I was like, oh, I work at Fun Zone. Say hello when you're here. The person I'm talking about is Vicky. So Vicky, if anyone who knows me personally, probably knows that Vicky is one of my best friends for now 20 years. And she came, and I think she actually might even came with Big Matt at the time. And Vicky was always mediocre at DDR. She'll tell you that. She was always mediocre. But of course, Big Matt is very good. As I remember, Vicky and Big Matt actually went to college together. I think that's what that was. Um, so that's how they knew each other. So I saw Big Matt play, and it was like, holy shit! Like he was eons beyond any other player I've ever seen, right? Because I didn't come to New York City yet. New York City people weren't coming to Long Island because it's just not easy for them to get here. So I was like, holy crap, like really good. I don't remember if it was the first time, but we definitely brought Big Matt out once. I remember that's actually specifically when I think I brought him to FYE. I brought him to FYE and he played Dropout, which was the fastest song in the game I think at the time. And everyone's watching him, and I think he double ate it on fifth mix, and everyone was like, "What the?" because no one's done that. Um, so yeah, he was really good. But yeah, I met Vicky at Fun Zone, and then after we, both went home. I think I was working at the time, and she went home or whatever, and we said, oh my God, you were the person that whatever, blah blah blah. So the reason that's important for me specifically was that she was the person that actually introduced me to New York City DDR. So she would actually take me to Queens. We used to go to the NYDS in Woodside, and she'd take me there, and I was like, this is weird because it's not a traditional arcade. It's a NYDS was a fashion shop with tchotchkes and stuff like that, that happened to have DDR machines in the back. Super random. Like you would have no idea that there was an arcade in the back of the store if you walked by it. You had no idea. But that was very common for Queens DDR actually, because we had another DDR machine that was randomly in a pool hall called Karam Cafe in Flushing. So that was just a thing, I guess, over there. There was also Smiles, which was an arcade, but no one really went there. But anyway, yeah. So I used to go to Queens, and then further from that, she also introduced me to Manhattan, Chinatown Fair, Broadway City, Laser Park, all those places, and got to know a lot of the folks, like Anthony was saying, that were online, right? These names that were online, and you would see the people play, and you would ask, hey, are you on DDR Freak? And they're like, yeah, I know who are you? Like, oh my God, whatever. So got to meet a lot of people that way. Um, and I don't know how it happened. What I'm thinking about is how I got started organizing. I don't remember how it happened. I think how it happened maybe was that I was getting bored of seeing DDR competitions. I think it's hard because it's a very big blur. There's a lot of there's a lot of history. It's 20 years ago, and probably 10 years worth of history that I'm trying to sift through. Um, but I think my first tournament that I ran was actually in a lock-in, and I remember seeing regular perfect attack tournaments or freestyle tournaments and being like, okay, it's cool, but it's the same thing every time, and I wanted to like spice it up. So one of the first things that I think I remember vividly trying was something called musical grading, which I did on the fifth mix. So basically, what I did was it was basically not like a head-to-head kind of thing. You were actually playing more or less against the machine, and you would play. You could pick any song that you wanted, but you had to get at least starting out a B on the song. So if the person came up to the stage, picked something and got a B on it, then they were allowed to basically stay in the competition. Um, so you would do that, and then after all the songs were B'd, then you would go to try to A all the songs. So as people are trying to, try to A all the songs, some people get knocked out because they're not good enough to actually A, you know, I don't know what was like Dropout, for example. So they would get knocked out. And eventually you would only have, I don't know, 10 songs that weren't A'd yet. But you had good people that were playing there. So eventually they would be, we would be able to get past the A'ing all the songs. And then that meant that you'd have to now start double A'ing songs. And that's when people started getting knocked out, clearly, because you would have to be a little strategic about what song you were going to actually pick. Because if you pick something that was too hard, you can double A, you would be knocked out, and somebody else could potentially. So it's very much like last man standing kind of thing. Um, so it was things like that that were really interesting to me. But ultimately, people wanted standardized, tournaments. So I started organizing a couple of them in Long Island. But eventually, and I don't even remember how this happened, um, because I don't think I asked to organize it. Um, but I organized the tournament in Broadway City. I think it was probably one of the last tournaments, um, which I barely remember. I think I remember. I think this was the tournament where someone was playing Stay by Test on the South Picks machine, and then the power just went out, and we had to stop the tournament. Um, so yeah, that's not Long Island DDR. It's more of I remember, but yeah, I kind of fell into organization of stuff. I mean, I'm a person who likes to organize just in general, not necessarily people, but just in life. So I guess it was something that I ended up falling into. But I think the thing that probably pushed it more so was when I became a moderator on DDR Freak, and that's its own kind of trajectory and story personally that I could talk about in different time maybe. But um, when I started doing moderation DDR Freak, that's when you get more, I guess, publicity or you're more um, you're more well known because it's a much smaller subset of people that are in the spotlight more or less on the internet of DDR Freak. Now, when I talk about DDR Freak, it's important to like understand the scope of DDR Freak at the time because this is also the same time that like Halo was out, like the first Halo. And that was a big deal for Xbox and stuff like that. What you need to realize is DDR Freak's community was larger than the Halo community. Larger in terms of their forums, right? We're talking about the forums, the people on the forums, and the activity on the forums. The DDR Freak forums were the largest like internet community I think many people have ever seen. I remember seeing like metrics saying that was like the top 10 internet community in terms of volume of people and activity at some point in time back, maybe I'll say even 2003 or something like that. So it was huge. And to eventually become a moderator, which wasn't 2003, it was a few years later, you're a small subset. You're talking 20 people out of hundreds of thousands uh, that are representing DDR kind of for the community. That's really what you're doing. So, you know, admittedly, the other moderators probably weren't organizing things as much. I mean, NY Stargate, who was one of the first moderators of New York, I think he ran a couple of NYDS tournaments, but I just felt like this obligation, I guess, oddly, um, to be like, okay, I'm representing the community here in New York. I should be, doing good somehow, some way. Um, but admittedly, also there was a part of me personally that just loved meeting people. I've been an extrovert for a long time, so you know, I'm not trying to make this political, but it was very much also about meeting people out there. I love that. But also when it comes with the moderation thing, Anthony mentioned, doing stuff in the media. Much of the stuff that was coming in the media was media companies going to DDR free because that's what you found when you were searching DDR, and they would message JDog, who was the main administrator and owner of DDR Freak, about doing a segment, and then he would post in the moderation channel, "Hey, moderators in New York or wherever, really, do you have anyone that would be good for TV or whatever project that this media piece of person was working on to for the segment or whatever?" So that would happen every once in a while, where we would have to find someone in the community to do a segment. Like one of those people was we put Fat Axel on MTV during I think it was TRL of all things, and he had a good time playing on that one. There's a entire story behind that. But yeah, so there was things like that were happening. That I was involved in. Additionally, the Sports World tournament is huge. And biggest shout outs to Sammy, SFE Taz was his name there, for organizing that. And he was also instrumental, of course, in the Javits tournaments. That was his baby. It wasn't mine. I know I was the face of it, but he was the one that was actually behind the scenes doing all that work. I mean, he owned the machines. He was moving around and stuff, and that was him. It wasn't really me. I just have a big personality, so it looks like I'm the face of it, but ultimately it's actually him. Um, and uh, I'll speak a little bit about Sports World. I have since That was a big part also because it was a turning point for me and for Deshaun. Because as I think most people know, I was originally like a freestyler and probably known more as a freestyler than Perfect Attack, certainly. Um, and I won my first freestyle tournament at FYE doing Electrotuned. And then the following day, I went to NYDS to compete in their freestyle tournament against Pfizer. I remember him specifically being there. Uh, and I won there. And I was like, oh, this is a thing that I could be good at, I guess. The electric tune routine, by the way, is on my YouTube channel in the DDR thing there, playlist. So you could watch it in its very 1040p glory. It's like so small. Um, so, but yeah, Sports World was really indescribable. It's very much a you had to be there kind of thing. People that were there could talk about it, in their own aspects, like I'm about to. But there was an energy in that room that no one really expected. And Sammy would tell you too, like he didn't expect it to be big at all. He was just putting it out there, like, "Hey, I'm gonna have a tournament here in New Jersey. If you want to come, come." And all of a sudden, the entire Eastern Seaboard decided to come. It was crazy. But from my experience at Sports World, and I could speak a little bit on Deshaun's, and I hope he actually makes a video. But from my experience at Sports World was, I came there with, you know, low expectations really. I knew there was a freestyle tournament. I knew that other people from, other places would show up, and I didn't, I was working on a routine. I was working on drifting away, and I didn't really think much of it. The thing that I really thought was going to be cool was the reverse fall thing that I do, like about halfway through, but you kind of get a chance to see a little bit in there. But I didn't think I really didn't think I was going to win, because I was saw a lot of other really good routines. His name was also Don, I think, but I think he went by the name Wicked, and he did a routine to DXY or Dixie, which was really good. We have to talk about John Evelashi, who got second place, and he got really mad that he got second place because he thought that he was so much better than me, and that was the thing that kind of made me sour forever about him, because he said he was a trained dancer, blah blah blah, and all this other stuff. It's not about that. It's about the entertainment value, and if that the crowd, or more really the judges, thought I was more entertaining than you, was sorry. It's happened to me. It happened to me in Albany, where I got second place to Nugget, when I also spoke to all the judges, within months afterwards, telling me that I should have won. It's just like, okay, but that's just how it goes. It happens, that kind of stuff happens to everyone. Anyway, Sports World, it was just a fun time for me. Honestly, I wasn't thinking much other until, I ended up winning. I was like, holy, I wasn't expecting that. But I want to explain the PA tournament as I remember it, and as Dijon also, we've talked about Sports World so many times because it's such a big part. But for Dijon, I'll just talk about kind of the end, because there is a story that he'll talk about. He'll talk about Max Paranoia and Trip Machine in there for sure. He'll talk about what everybody thought was the qualifier, things like that. But one of the things I really want to talk about was on the Jazz. And I'll be very brief on it because I think Deshaun will do a lot better, hopefully, again, like I said, in him talking about his leading up to it. But that was his pocket song. He was wanting to make sure that he knew every little crevice of On the Jazz, because that was his ace in the hole. He knew that Max Unlimited was a song that was going to be played against him. Like, he knew it. So he needed something to go and beat that. And luckily, this particular tournament was 2 out of 3. And what that means is that it doesn't matter how many perfects you get. It's not cumulative perfects. It is if you beat them on the song or not. And that's it. So, and you compare On the Jazz to Max Unlimited in terms of number of steps, like, you could clearly just wipe the floor with someone if you could perfect all of Max Unlimited. Because you could basically have I don't know, two songs worth of perfects in there, and there's no way of coming back from that. But the 2 out of 3, you could fair and square beat someone on, one particular song, and actually be in the running, and that's exactly what was really helpful here because I think Deshaun got. Well, I think I remember him saying that he got single-digit grades on a regular basis, but I think maybe he got, in the teens or something like that, or maybe it was really low. I don't know. I don't remember. Um, but I'm not going to spoil it for him in terms of the response, but the response that he had on the Jazz was completely out of character for him. So, but ultimately, as everyone knows in history, he won that tournament, and the only course for that is actually on Anthony's channel, where you can actually see like Zeus give up because by the time he gets to DXY, he knows he's behind, and he actually starts spinning around in it. So, but yeah, that was a turning point for me. At that point, I felt like I was a freestyle, you know, contender, and I had to go to all the freestyle tournaments that I could in my vicinity to, be a part of that. And I did a good job at a lot of them. One of the other ones that I'm really known for is Wild Rush, which was upstate, and that's the one I got second place. Um, so that was something that was going on. And then the other thing I'll briefly mention before I wrap up as well is um, DDR simulators, which is stuff like people probably know a lot today of Setmania, but before that was something called Dance with Intensity, DWI, because I really liked making, I really liked the idea of step design. So I was doing a lot of work in trying to like make these step charts to songs and figuring out what would be interesting. There was even step chart contests, which, oh god, it was ran by DDREI. There was a guy named Sivan, I think, who was running it. I don't remember the name of the competition, but we used to send step charts in. They would be judged and stuff. The reason I bring this up is the reason why I became a moderator at DDR Freak was because I was so involved with simulators, which is crazy. There was a simulator channel in DDR Freak. I was very involved in that, and eventually the moderators noticed that I was kind of helping that community where other people weren't. So they made a moderator there. I also bring this up because I go back to Airwalker. Airwalker was one of the first people to start making really, really hard charts. He would take a lot of the 2DX songs and make them really hard, like V and A, Kakame, all that stuff, and he basically made it really hard to play, which got things up to speed about playing Stepmania as a real kind of game. We used to call it 4-key auto scratch because it was similar to what you were doing with B-Mania, which was like 5-key and scratch pad. But he went by the moniker B-Body Ruler. So if you ever see any B-Body Ruler stuff, which is probably still sitting around, it's like one of the first most popular packs. That was him doing all that, which again, that's some timely stuff. And then I will also just wrap up on saying that speaking about Long Island, Long Island Joe was also from the same town that Jen and I were from. He was actually a grade below me. And we used to see each other in the arcades because he was an arcade rat just like I was. Because I was an arcade rat before DDR. I was playing fighting games just like he was. And we got friendly because of fighting games, I'm pretty sure. And then I think he started working at Fun Zone for a little bit. I don't remember how that happened, but I think he started working at Fun Zone for a little bit. And I introduced him to DDR. He got absolutely obsessed with Dropout. He started playing doubles also, so we used to call him Joe Doubles. But he used to play Dropout constantly. He also had long hair, he's in the music scene, and I think he plays a couple of instruments, and he was in a band or something like that. But he had the long hair and the black shirt, that was his jam. And yeah, we became friendly because we were in the same town and we worked at the same place, and you kind of can't help but have those connections. And he's told the story a couple of times already that I was the person who introduced him to Chinatown Fair, and basically it blew it from there. But he went to Chinatown Fair to play DDR. Let's get that clear. He went to Chinatown Fair to play DDR at first, and that's where he got introduced to all the fighting games and clearly the community, and blew up from there. And I'm super proud of what he's been able to accomplish that I wanted to accomplish in DDR. Um, I worked a really hard to make it a spectacle. I wanted it to be as big as Evo at some point. I think it had the opportunity to in my mind, but something that Deshaun has also said to me is that like fighting games are really easy to do a one-to-one comparison for lay people that aren't paying attention, right? Like the fighting games, you see a person punch the other person. Clearly, the person who's punching is winning, and the person who's getting hit is losing, right? It's very clear to show. In DDR, you don't know what you're looking at. if you don't, if you've never seen it, like we have, you have no idea what it looks like. So you can't just put it on ESPN and expect people to understand what's going on. Um, so that's the ultimate blocker for making DDR a competitive spectacle. You know, all DDR ever had was the exercise angle. That's all it ever had. When I was on the news talking about DDR, I tried to actually go in the competitive angle, and they told me, "No, let's get serious now. Let's talk about weight loss." Like, at the time, I'm not the person to talk about weight loss. I was skinny, and I before DDR, and I was just continuing to maintain because of DDR, really. And admittedly, I wish they would have told me that they wanted someone that had a weight loss story with DDR, because I would have known people. I could have brought someone, no problem, but they didn't give me, any backstory. So I know that was all over the place, but that's just about my mind was working about this DDR stuff. I didn't, make an outline or anything like that to like really, touch on the points, because admittedly, like I said, it's all a blur. Um, and yeah. Oh, you know what? I'll mention one last thing, which was really, really cool, was Tour de Dance. So my friend Jen and I, and then some other friends, Elliot and Kunal, we decided that we were going to hit every single DDR machine in Lower New York. So we planned out a trip from out East Long Island to all the way into the city to play on every single DDR machine. So we started at 10 o'clock in the morning when the doors opened in East Long Island, and we drove and hit FYE, Bayville, Fun Zone, uh, Green Acres Mall. We were there. And then we ended up parking um, by Elliot's neighborhood, and then we took the train into the city. I know we drove. I think we drove to Queens as well, and then we came back down there. But then we hit. I want to say that we hit four places in the city. I think what we did was we went. I'm pretty sure we went to Chinatown first, just because all the other machines were in Midtown. So we went to Chinatown first, hit that one machine, and we wanted to end at Broadway City because clearly that's where you have to end. Um, I know clearly we went to Laser Park and played. Absolutely. I don't remember if Port Authority had a machine or not, but I remember there being four machines in Manhattan that we had to hit. So maybe Port Authority had a machine and we played there. But then we ended up Broadway City, and the thing I remember at Broadway City was that Broadway City. This is a Saturday night, and Saturday night at Broadway City is crazy, absolutely crazy. And we were in a time crunch because we wanted to do it all on the same day. If we ended up going into the next day after midnight, it would have been like, oh, like it wasn't, all on the same day. So we get to, I think we got to Broadway City around 11 something. So we only have about an hour. And if it wasn't Broadway City, we'd probably get on the machine within the hour. But Broadway City had about that time is crazy. We're talking like, a line of cards. This is how you put in the machine. A line of cards that was taking up the entire monitor. So like, um, luckily, people knew who we were and what we were doing, and we were able to like basically cut in the line to play that particular night, which ended up being able to like get us before midnight, and we celebrated, and that was the Tour de Dance, and that was really fun. And I think also there were pictures, which there's no way I'll be able to find them, of us taking a picture of each machine as we finished on it. But anyway, I'll end there. Promise, I'm ending right there. And I hope other people from the community back then, or even really now, can shed some light on some of the spots that I put in there. because I would love to hear more about sports world from other people's perspectives. Um, People's perspectives about the Javits tournament, Long Island perspectives. Honestly, I don't know how I'd find them because I don't know I don't know any of those other people except for Long Island Joe that are still around. But this is fun. Thanks for taking down memory lane a little bit, and yeah, that's it.